There are names carved into stone you were never meant to see, not because they were forgotten, but because they were erased. Power does not simply grow, it feeds. And in the shadows of history, it feeds on the innocent, the silenced, the erased. Salem was never about witches. It was about property. It was about bloodlines. It was about eliminating threats to a dynasty so old its roots drink from wells deeper than the founding of the colonies. You were taught this was religious hysteria, a primitive time, mass delusion. But hysteria is never random. It has a conductor, a source. And in Salem, that source had a name, Blackwell. 3 brothers, a judge, a reverend, a sheriff, each one with a hand in law, soul, and violence. Together they operated not as a family, but as a machine designed to harvest land, wealth, lives. And beneath their public duties they maintained a hidden ledger, written in Mercy Blackwell's hand, the judge's daughter, the reverend's ward, the sheriff's niece. The ledger told a story no history book would dare publish. You've heard of the 19, the ones hanged for witchcraft. But the ledger documents 237, executed, disappeared, stolen, their properties seized, their voices cut off like the final breath at the end of a rope. Acquisition complete. That was the phrase repeated again and again beside their names. Not guilty, not witch, not bewitched, but acquisition complete. Think about that. The trials weren't a fever, they were a strategy, coordinated, executed, profitable. The Blackwells weren't God-fearing, they were empire-building, and their descendants still hold dominion over that land today, still cloaked in historical legitimacy, still shaping the story to hide the harvest. But the most damning evidence wasn't in the gallows. It was in a name that appears at the end of that ledger. Mercy Blackwell. 5 words beside it. Family matter resolved. Her silence wasn't compliance. It was survival, and it cost her everything. The story you're about to hear is not fiction. It is a hidden history, a forbidden descent into how empires are truly made. If you feel something stirring in your chest right now, that's not fear. That's memory. You've seen this pattern before, in every system, every institution, every manipulation. You just didn't have a name for it. Until now. Are you ready to descend? They say history is written by the victors, but the truth is, it's edited by the architects. What if the world you live in wasn't built on freedom, but on a beautifully engineered lie? Not a single deception, but a web, spun slowly, masterfully, across centuries. A tapestry of half-truths, inverted values, and manufactured myths. A lie so vast, so old, you were born inside it. The modern world wasn't born from progress. It was born from control. They told us the Renaissance was a rebirth of knowledge. But who funded the academies? Who decided which books survived the flames and which were buried? They told us the Enlightenment was a victory of reason. But reason for who? Whose logic ruled? Whose empire expanded beneath the flag of rational thought? Look closer. The Industrial Revolution didn't liberate the world, it shackled it. Factories weren't symbols of progress, they were temples of obedience. Cities weren't havens of culture, they were cages of concrete, systems of control scaled to the size of nations. And in this new world, man was no longer sacred. He was a unit, a cog, a consumer, a number. Behind every revolution, behind every liberation, stood the same shadowed hands. Not kings, kingmakers, not prophets, programmers. The men who wrote the scripts before they handed us the stage. And we, naive, hopeful, proud, played our parts perfectly. They gave us ideologies like they were gifts, wrapped in flags, delivered with anthems. But every ism, every movement, every holy crusade was just a new mask for the same game. Divide, distract, dominate. They taught us to chase rights while stealing our power, to worship information while hiding truth, to believe we are free while living in cages of our own consent. This is not conspiracy. This is architecture. And the lie at the heart of it? That you are powerless, that truth is relative, that nothing matters but comfort, status, and survival. They needed you to believe that, because if you ever remembered who you really were, what you really are, the entire illusion would collapse. And that's what they fear most. Because the lie isn't just the foundation of the modern world. The lie is the modern world. You were never meant to ask the real questions. Who benefits from your obedience? Who profits from your confusion? Who designed the silence behind the noise? They don't need bars anymore. Not when they've perfected the blueprint of psychological chains. Not when they've mastered consent by illusion. This is not about governments or presidents. Those are puppets, rotating masks on a permanent face. The real architects are older, deeper, hidden behind institutions, foundations, councils, with names that sound benevolent, neutral, necessary, but nothing they do is neutral. These are the minds that engineered the 20th century, not through war alone, but through symbols, language, narrative. The real battleground wasn't Europe or the Pacific, it was your mind. The human psyche became their frontier, and the weapon of choice was story. They rewrote education into indoctrination, fed us sanitized histories, hollow victories, and noble lies. They turned universities into factories of acceptable thought, manufacturing credentials, not wisdom, teaching obedience, not mastery, rewarding agreement, not truth. They redefined journalism, no longer a searchlight for corruption, but a mouthpiece for its agenda. They flooded screens with heroes who obey, villains who rebel, and laugh tracks that cover the sound of your freedom dying. And when that wasn't enough, they went deeper, into the subconscious. They funded psychologists to map your impulses. They built think tanks to chart your emotions. They learned how to bypass your logic and speak directly to your limbic system. Fear, desire, tribalism. Then they packaged it, sold it, weaponized it. Marketing isn't about products, it's about control. Every ad is a spell, every slogan a neurochemical trigger, every algorithm a mirror turned against you. You didn't grow up choosing your beliefs, you were conditioned to receive them. Freedom of choice, when every option is pre-selected. Freedom of speech, when the Overton window is engineered. Freedom of thought, when every thought was seeded by unseen hands. The architects never wanted to control your body, they wanted your soul, because once you surrender the right to define reality, they never need to enslave you again. They let you decorate your cage, they let you vote for your warden, and they taught you to call it freedom. Beneath the visible world, a machine hums, silent, relentless, patient. It doesn't wear a face, it doesn't need a name. It doesn't care who you vote for, what you believe, or what God you kneel to, because it already owns the framework in which you think. It wrote the script, built the theater, chose the actors. You call it society. But it's not. It's a system designed not for your growth, not for your sovereignty, but for your compliance, for your quiet resignation. It rewards the obedient, punishes the aware. It gives you comfort to numb the questions, entertainment to silence the unrest, distractions to replace meaning. You are bombarded with stimulation, yet starved of substance, surrounded by information, yet deprived of wisdom. And every piece of this machine has a function. The education system doesn't teach you how to think. It teaches you what not to think. It molds you into a compliant unit, docile, predictable, easily led. It praises memorization, punishes intuition. It doesn't raise philosophers. It manufactures labor. The media doesn't inform, it programs. It reduces the complexity of human life into digestible slogans and curated outrage. It weaponizes empathy. It makes you feel, but never act. It simulates truth while sterilizing dissent. The economy? It's not a ladder. It's a treadmill, a constant race to stay afloat while wealth concentrates at the top in silence. Inflation, taxation, debt, all part of the same design, a siphon. You trade your time, your life, for numbers that vanish in crises they orchestrate. And while you run, you're being watched. Every move, every click, every emotion is harvested, quantified, fed back into the machine. Not to serve you, but to predict you, to own your future before you even choose it. Privacy was never lost. It was sold. And you signed the contract because they made the terms feel normal. This machine doesn't care about justice. It only cares about equilibrium. It's equilibrium. The moment you see it, name it, question it, you threaten that balance. And the system is programmed to defend itself. Not with bullets, with ridicule, with censorship, with digital exile, with invisible walls that ensure you never break the perimeter again. This isn't a glitch. This is the design. The machine doesn't sleep, and it never forgets. Behind the machine, there are hands, unseen, unnamed, untouchable. You've never voted for them. You've never seen them on a screen. And yet, they shape the reality you wake up in, not by force, but by precision, patience. Generations of control passed down in silence, like bloodlines of power hidden in plain sight. They don't wear crowns anymore. They don't need to. Today they wear suits, sit on boards, control central banks, foundations, institutions that outlive presidents, topple economies, rewrite history in school books. You may know some of the names. Most you never will. They're not driven by greed. Greed is for amateurs. These men, these families, are driven by architecture. Control is the blueprint. Order is the goal. Total planetary order. Not chaos, not war. Not unless it's useful. Not unless it moves the plan forward. Because war makes money. Crisis creates opportunity. Fear makes people beg for control. You think events are spontaneous. That history is random. But what if the wars, the crashes, the collapses weren't failures of the system, but functions of it? Each one a calculated step in a generational strategy, engineered decades in advance by minds playing a game with no end. When empires fall, these architects rise. When economies die, they acquire. When governments collapse, they install, always unseen, always upstream from consequence. They don't need armies. They own the money that funds them. They don't need headlines. They own the networks that write them. They don't need to censor truth. They drown it in noise, mock it into silence, fracture it into conspiracy. And when one hand is exposed, another moves quietly behind the curtain. Their greatest weapon? Patience. While you think in years, they think in centuries. While you chase success, they build dynasties. While you argue left versus right, they buy both. They don't want revolution. They want apathy. They don't need your consent. They just need your distraction. Their influence is not a theory. It is infrastructure. Embedded in global finance, academia, defense, philanthropy. They hide behind non-profit smiles, globalist slogans, human rights campaigns, all veneers masking an ancient hunger for control. You were taught they don't exist. That's exactly how they want it. But look closer. The strings are everywhere, and the puppets don't even know they're dancing. They don't need cages. They've built something far stronger, Consent. You believe you're free because you can choose your brand of soda, your color of phone, your flavor of outrage. But choice is not freedom. Not when every option is manufactured by the same machine. Not when every path leads to the same outcome. Compliance. Modern control doesn't chain the body. It rewires the mind. Since birth, you've been studied like a lab rat. Every reaction, every impulse, measured. Not to liberate you, but to program you. Behaviorism, operant conditioning, social conformity experiments, Ivy League departments funded by defense contracts, military intelligence working hand in glove with university psychology labs, not for curiosity, for control. They learned what makes you obey, and then they scaled it. They discovered fear short-circuits logic, that stress increases suggestibility, that isolation breaks resistance. They found the precise ratio of threat and comfort that makes a population beg for authority, makes them thank their captors. Remember 1961, the Milgram experiment. Volunteers told to administer electric shocks to strangers. They screamed, they begged, but most continued. Why? Because a man in a lab coat said, "You must continue." That's all it took. A symbol of authority, an illusion of responsibility, a nudge from behind the curtain, and good people became instruments of harm. They weren't monsters. They were trained. Today, the lab coat has been replaced by credentials, screens, algorithms, the shocks, now digital, emotional, psychological, constant. But the obedience remains. You trust the experts. You defer to consensus. You self-censor to avoid shame. You conform, not because you're weak, but because the system was engineered to exploit your need to belong. The media repeats. The screens reward. The fact-checkers correct. And slowly, the mind reshapes itself. Thought becomes fear. Dissent becomes danger. Truth becomes relative. This is not an accident. It is design. A population that cannot question is a population that cannot rebel. And the most effective tyranny is the one you never see, the kind that makes you police yourself, cancel your neighbor, and defend your chains as progress. You were taught to obey, not by whip, but by science. And the experiment is still running, right now. And you're in it. When tyranny tightens its grip, the people cry for a savior. And that's exactly when he appears. The false Messiah does not come with horns and fire. He comes smiling, wrapped in charisma, promising peace, unity, salvation. He wears the mask of hope, but behind it lies the machinery of control. Every age has one, a polished voice, a carefully crafted image, a man elevated by media, worshipped by crowds, untouchable by law. He speaks your language, mirrors your pain, and offers you redemption, if only you'll kneel. But understand this, he does not rise organically, he is installed by the architects. Every speech, every crisis, every rise in popularity, it is orchestrated. The myth of the outsider, the lone reformer, the righteous rebel, a lie. The false Messiah is their most powerful tool, a pressure release valve wrapped in flesh, a symbol designed to redirect your rage, disarm your resistance, and lull you back into submission. He is the smiling face of the machine. Remember history. When Rome faltered, they turned to emperors as gods. When Germany starved, they crowned a voice that promised resurrection. Every collapse breeds a hunger for order, and in that void, the false Messiah is born. And when you hand him your trust, you hand him your chains. He speaks of enemies, real and imagined. He draws lines, builds movements, divides tribes, and all the while the machine grows behind him. Corporate, military, financial, digging deeper roots under the illusion of revolution. But revolutions born on screens and slogans do not free the people. They only rotate the throne. This is the masterstroke. Make the prisoner love the new warden. He may look different. He may sound righteous. He may even expose real corruption. But the moment he leads you back into the system, he has completed his mission. The false Messiah offers hope, not freedom. Hope is the drug. Freedom is the threat. And you will know him not by his words but by the power that shelters him and the truths he never dares to speak. Because the one who truly threatens the system is silenced, not sponsored. So when the next great savior steps forward, ask yourself, who built his stage, and who benefits when you believe? Beneath the polished world of prophets and politics lies a darker current, one the powerful don't speak of, but always obey. It is not measured in dollars or gold or digital tokens. It is measured in blood. This is the sacrifice economy, ancient, hidden, and brutally efficient, a currency of control traded behind closed doors where suffering becomes fuel and destruction becomes offering. You were taught to see history as progress, but the truth is far older and far colder. All empires are fed by ritual loss. War is not always fought for land. Sometimes it is fought for ritual. The deaths, the despair, the displacement, these are not unintended consequences. They are transactions, human pain, recycled as spiritual leverage. Because for the elite few, the world is a temple, and in every temple, something must die. Look closely. The timing of disasters, the symbolism, the eerily scripted chaos, the televised trauma that loops again and again, burning fear into the collective mind. It's not random, it's not coincidence, it's programming. A mass ritual of consent, where your emotion becomes energy, your belief becomes binding. The sacrifice economy demands participation, but not all are equal. Some are taken, others are chosen, and a very few are protected. Celebrities rise and fall in perfect patterns. Some vanish, some implode, some become martyrs. Their stories are crafted like myths, echoing ancient archetypes. This is the new pantheon, the new theater of ritual, and the audience applauds, unaware they are part of the spell. Children go missing, wars erupt, icons collapse, and the world shrugs, because it's all been normalized, ritualized, disguised. The sacrifice economy does not ask permission, it simply functions, like gravity, like hunger. It turns terror into power, and power into more terror. The architects feed off it, because in their world, destruction is divine. Ask yourself, why do the same symbols appear at tragedies? Why do the same patterns repeat, generation after generation? Why does the world always seem on the edge of catastrophe, but never quite escapes? Because the economy must continue, the rituals must proceed, and you are the offering that never stops giving, until you see it, until you name it, until you reject your role in their theater. You remain their fuel. The most effective prison is the one you never realize you're in, and the most powerful chains are made of your own reflection. This is the secret weapon of the architects, the mirror. Not the one in your bathroom, but the mirror of culture, media, and identity. You don't just see yourself in it, you become what it shows. They crafted the mirror carefully, pixel by pixel, image by image, a perfect reflection of what they wanted you to want. Beauty standards, gender roles, success metrics, dreams, fears, all programmed into the surface, waiting for your gaze. And once you looked into it, you were caught. You began comparing. You began conforming. You began consuming. And somewhere along the way, you stopped being. Who you really are was buried beneath layers of synthetic identity. Your opinions became recitations. Your emotions became advertisements. Your goals, hand-me-downs from dead men in boardrooms. They didn't need to enslave your body, only your image. That's how they control billions, through the mirror. Social media is the altar. The algorithm is the priest. And your validation is the offering. You beg it to like you. You beg it to see you. And the more it sees, the more it reshapes you into them. This is the digital sorcery of the new age. It doesn't break bones. It bends perception. It doesn't force you. It seduces you. Until your identity is no longer yours. Until your mind is a collage of filtered fragments. Until you forget you ever had a choice. The mirror doesn't just reflect. It infects. Every time you scroll, every time you post, every time you compare, you are reinforcing the system that feeds on your need to be seen. But here's the final trick. Even when you turn off the screen, the mirror stays inside you. Every insecurity, every fear of missing out, every desperate need for attention, it's been encoded. And unless you shatter that mirror from within, you will keep seeing their world through their lens forever. So ask yourself, whose reflection are you living? And when was the last time you looked in a mirror and saw something real? They made you forget, not by erasing pages from a book, but by writing over your mind, replacing the primal with the programmed, replacing the sacred with the synthetic. You were not born lost. You were led into the maze, and the walls, built from forgotten truths. The architects understood a brutal law. A people without memory are a people without power, and so they set fire to the archives of your soul. They buried the wisdom of your ancestors beneath shopping malls, billboards, and fast food signs. They drowned your ancient instincts in fluorescent light and fluorescent lies. They took your hunger for meaning and fed you trivia, fed you sitcoms, fed you pills. They didn't need to destroy your body. They just needed to dull your fire. They made you forget what it means to feel deeply, to mourn, to rage, to know, not with data, but with bone, with blood, with spirit. They replaced myth with marketing, ritual with routine. And now, you're adrift in a world of echoes, but somewhere deep in you, something remembers. The smell of soil, the cry of the hawk, the taste of wild water, the silence between lightning and thunder. These are your true inheritance, but the architects taught you to mock it, to see it as primitive, savage, backward, because if you ever returned to the root, to the fire, to the real, they would lose everything. So they trained you to forget. Forget your tribe, forget your rhythm, forget your connection to everything that lives, breathes, and bleeds. They gave you false gods, celebrity, currency, status, and told you to kneel, and now you bow. Not to spirit, but to screens. Not to the divine, but to the digital. But here's the hidden horror. They didn't just erase your memory. They erased the world's. Whole civilizations scrubbed from history, whole sciences suppressed, whole stories of power, of rebellion, of awakening, buried so deep you'd never know they existed. And yet, the silence is cracking. The amnesia is wearing off, and in the stillness between their signals, your memory stirs. There is something ancient inside you, something they couldn't kill. They feared it then. They fear it now, because once you remember who you were, you'll never be controlled again. Truth is not hidden. It is buried, under concrete, under policy, under decades of distraction carefully engineered by masters of misdirection. The ones who understood that real control doesn't come from guns or chains. It comes from what you're too afraid to say or even think. This is the machinery of silence, not just censorship, engineering consent, making you grateful for your own blindness, proud of your own cage. They don't need to forbid truth if they can make you ridicule it. Mockery is their firewall. Shame is their shield. So when someone speaks the unspeakable, challenges the narrative, pulls back the veil, the system activates, not with bullets, but with algorithms, with fact-checkers, with whispers of conspiracy. with the slow, silent isolation of anyone who remembers. They don't erase the rebels, they disconnect them, turn them into static, turn them into noise. This is psychological warfare wrapped in politeness, a silent genocide of the soul, where forbidden thoughts are more dangerous than forbidden weapons. You don't need a prison when the mind is already locked down. But the cracks are growing. Whistleblowers, leaked files, anomalies in the script that even their AI can't cover. They scramble to patch the hole in the narrative, each patch exposing another. Every lie they deny only tightens the noose around their own system, because silence is brittle, and when it breaks, it shatters, and the sound it makes is truth. But here's what they fear most. Not the few who speak, but the many who finally listen. The worker who begins to question. The soldier who begins to feel. The mother who sees through the propaganda wrapped in pastel. The child who looks up at a dead-eyed teacher and simply asks, why? The machinery of silence can't survive questions. It can't survive memory. It can't survive the sound of human beings waking up. They tried to drown you in noise, in shame, in spectacle, but you are still here, still searching, still listening, and now the silence is screaming. Now you begin to hear, not the voice of authority, but the voice behind the veil, the one they tried to kill, the one that never died. You were born on a battlefield, not of bullets, not of bombs, but of beliefs. A war without uniforms, without borders, without end. The most dangerous war of all, the one you never knew you were in. This is the invisible war. A war for your perception. A war for your memory. A war for the very fabric of what you believe reality is. They fight with headlines, with hashtags, with schoolbooks, with screens. They infiltrate your dreams, not with nightmares, but with numbness. They don't want to scare you. They want to pacify you, make you obedient, make you forget. Forget who you were before the conditioning, before the indoctrination, before the hypnosis of comfort wrapped around your throat like a silk noose. The soldiers in this war don't wear medals. They wear lab coats, business suits, clerical collars, government IDs, influencer badges, and the weapons they wield. Words, definitions, decrees, diagnostic labels. They erase your fire and call it disorder. They erase your courage and call it delusion. They erase your intuition and call it misinformation. This isn't peace, it's domestication. You've been herded into cities, into classrooms, into patterns, into ideologies you never chose but were programmed to defend. And the war rages on every time you look in the mirror and forget the ancient blood running beneath your skin. The blood of warriors, prophets, poets, rebels. The blood of those who refuse to bow. They want you tamed, but something in you resists. A flicker, a pulse, a shadow of memory that haunts your sleep, a sense that things were never supposed to be this way, that what we call normal is a prison built out of collective amnesia. The invisible war doesn't need your death, it needs your compliance, but you're starting to remember. You're starting to see the propaganda behind the pixels, the programming behind the praise, the prison behind the polite, and once you see, you can't unsee. Once you wake, you can't go back, because this is not a simulation, it is a siege, and it's been going on since before you were born. Now it's your move, now it's your war. They always wear a smile when they come for you, not a snarl, not a glare, but a smile, a synthetic kindness stretched over something ancient and cold. They come in the name of help, of health, of safety, of science. But their tools are silence, sedation, and slow spiritual suffocation. This is the mask of mercy, the lie that what is being done to you is for your own good. They censor in the name of protection. They inject in the name of prevention. They surveil in the name of security. They imprison in the name of peace, but mercy without freedom is just control in costume. They say don't think too hard, it's dangerous. They say don't question the experts, they know better. They say don't resist, we're trying to help you. But you feel it, don't you? That pressure behind their gentle words, that threat behind their concern, that leash hidden inside their offer of comfort. Every tyranny throughout history has worn this mask. The Inquisition called it salvation. The Reich called it order. The Empire calls it democracy. But all of it was control, wrapped in velvet, drenched in sentiment, delivered with a tear and a trembling voice. And when you begin to refuse, when you start to speak, to see, to reject their script, they double down. Now you're a threat. Now you're unstable. Now you're a danger to society, because mercy must never be denied. Not in this system. Their mercy is the new morality. Refusing it is blasphemy. But here's the truth. Real mercy doesn't chain you. It frees you. Real healing doesn't come from forced conformity. It comes from truth. And truth, by its very nature, destroys illusion. The mask is cracking. You can see the fault lines in their faces. You can hear the trembling behind their voices. They fear the moment their illusion breaks, because their power dies with it. They don't fear violence. They fear awareness. They fear a man who thinks for himself. They fear a woman who remembers who she is. They fear anyone who looks at the smiling mask and sees the fangs behind it. The mask of mercy is slipping, and what's underneath was never mercy at all. There was once a temple, not built of stone, but of sacred laws, eternal principles, and the divine flame of truth. A temple where man bowed not to kings, but to conscience, where power served the soul, not the other way around. But that temple has been inverted, flipped upside down, hollowed, twisted. Now the altar feeds the priests, not the people. The rituals bind, not liberate. The sacred scrolls are rewritten in shadows, and the gods they worship are not the gods of life. This is the inverted temple. Look around. Sacred symbols are everywhere, but they've been hijacked. Crosses turned into cages, eyes once open, now weaponized. The very architecture of the soul has been re-engineered, not to elevate, but to entrap. The schools were once sanctuaries of wisdom. Now they are indoctrination chambers. The media was once a mirror to the world. Now it is a lens, bending the light to deceive. Even the family unit, once the core of strength and legacy, has been atomized, fragmented, sterilized. Because to rule the future, they must erase the past. They must invert every pillar, faith, truth, order, meaning, until up is down, wrong is right, and slavery feels like sanctuary. But make no mistake, this is not random decay. This is not just cultural confusion. This is a ritual desecration, an ancient inversion. You see, the darkness doesn't create, it perverts. It cannot build temples, so it topples them, reuses the stones, and carves its own twisted gods into the walls. And now the entire world kneels in the inverted temple, praying to illusions. We chant mantras of compliance. We light candles to institutions. We sacrifice our children on the altar of false progress. And worst of all, we call it good. But a few, a very few, still remember the original blueprint, the divine code etched in the soul, the upright temple now buried beneath centuries of corruption. You are one of those few. You've seen the inversion. You've heard the lie dressed as truth. You've felt the nausea that comes when the world calls darkness light. And in that pain, there is awakening. You are not crazy. You are remembering. The temple can rise again, but only when we tear down the one built in reverse. It begins in silence, a flicker in the mind, a pulse beneath the noise, a quiet voice long suppressed whispering, this is not how it was meant to be. And in that whisper, something stirs. The chains don't snap all at once. They crack, subtle, almost imperceptible. A question here, a refusal there, a memory of freedom, of fire, of truth. That's how it starts, not with armies or revolutions, but with one man waking up, then another, and another, until the lie trembles, until the inverted temple shakes. They cannot stop the storm once it remembers who it is. They can suppress, censor, distract, but they cannot unawaken a soul that has seen the machinery behind the curtain. They cannot unburn the fire that now spreads from eye to eye. You are that fire. They will call you mad, dangerous, a threat. But that is how truth always appears to the architects of illusion. Because when one man stands with eyes wide open, he is more dangerous than 1,000 marching in sleep. Understand this, the systems are not collapsing by accident. The corruption, the chaos, the engineered despair, it's not failure, it's the plan. They are collapsing the old world so they can birth a new one, theirs. Built not on liberty, but on total surveillance, dependency, compliance. But their greatest fear is that you'll build your own. One not designed in their image, but in the image of truth. A civilization of awake souls. They cannot program what they cannot predict. They cannot enslave what they cannot understand. So now, it falls to you, not to march, but to remember, to light the fire, to dismantle the lie piece by piece within yourself, and then the world, because the Great War was never out there. It has always been within. And in this final hour, when the darkness has convinced the world to kneel, you must rise. The storm is not coming. You are the storm.